Welcome to Spread Love in Organizations, the healthcare leadership podcast where we explore leadership with purpose. I am Naji, your host, joined today by Afarin Bellisario, a leader who bridges East and West, technology and the human condition, and past and present. Born and raised in Tehran, in a family with its feet in the past and its head in the future, she led a successful career in high-tech and international business in the US after earning her PhD from MIT. But writing had always been her passion. Having written professionally in pre-revolutionary Iran, she has published in major papers, including the Boston Globe and an essay, Movies with My Aunt, as part of the anthology Love and Pomegranates. Today, she mentors startups, teaches, and writes about the clash between tradition and modernity and how the past can shed light on our technology-fueled future. A music lover, she is also a Cambridge Chamber Ensemble board member and writes for their newsletter as well as on Medium. Afarin continues to discover new destinations globally. It's a great pleasure to host you and have you with me today.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure and honor to be on your podcast and speak with yourself and your audience.
It's first, I'd love to hear more about your personal story. We've met through MIT Sandbox, where you mentor. I know you're passionate about startups, but I really want to start with your personal story, from your childhood in Iran to high-tech business to now being an author, teacher, mentor. What's in between the lines of this great, inspiring journey of yours?
Well, first and foremost is that I am curious. I just want to know. I yearn to learn, and I yearn to interact with people, and I'm not afraid of change, and that's a good thing for and at heart, at least, entrepreneur. I mean, I work for a big corporation, but I always have been had a entrepreneurial or entrepreneurial, if you like, kind of position within those companies. My story, of course, begins in Iran. I grew up in a family that a friend of mine was just telling me that, there are parts of Iranians who always, the people my age, a lot of them who are born in North Tehran, for example, they know nothing about the South Tehran. But I was fortunate where my grandparents, for example, were traditional people living in Bazar. My grandfather was a merchant. And but my father was a university professor. He was a doctor. My aunts, everybody was educated. So we all moved to North Tehran, if you will. We were in the traditional part of Tehran, and then we moved north towards more westernized, more modern Tehran. And of course, more secular, the same thing with lots of American movies and American books and things like that. So I was fortunate to have my feet, one foot in one side, one foot in another, because I can understand the problems of this difference will create. I know, for example, ladies who worked in North Tehran. In North Tehran, you have to be, look like somebody who stepped out of a Bloomingdale's or Harrods or whatever. And in South Tehran, women were expected to wear a headscarf. And so therefore, it is very, very different way of life, different way of everything. And there were ladies who wanted to get ahead in life, and they went to school and stuff, and maybe get a job in North Tehran in some of these beautiful glass office buildings. But and I know that for a fact. So they would leave their house, because women in Iran lived with their parents. They leave their house, with their scarf and a very long skirt and no makeup, and somebody in their ride to their office, they would be transformed. It's sort of like almost like a Superman, but that would transform. And it wasn't that they wanted to be deceptive, but that's also explains what happened later on in Iran, because it's so I started there, and I my mind is like a sip. I mean, my memory. I mean, older people were talking about. I was a lonely child. I would listen to everybody. I would just, record all the stories in my mind. And I would make stories. I would change the stories that my grandma said and modernize it and things of that sort. But when I grew up, when I went to high school, it was clear that making a living with writing is not something that one can do without sacrificing a lot of their principles. And I wasn't about to do that. And I was lucky enough to have to be very good in math, and so I said, okay, and this is not, I'm not the only one. A lot of people, a lot of intellectuals in Iran have done that. They have a day job where they do whatever that it is that they do, and at nighttime they go and write books. So I planned to do that. So at some point in my life. And now, things change. Iran was very tumultuous. Coming to the United States to study, and I went to New York University, and then I transferred to MIT, and then the revolution happened, and that's another story. I finished my PhD, and I said, okay, see you, whatever. Then like many young people, I wanted a family, I wanted a husband, I want children. So it's sort of, I said, okay, well, we'll do it here, maybe someday. But in my heart of hearts, I knew that my life, and I was very lucky again, that I started here. In America, as you know better than I do, when you go to work here, you work full time, and then you have a young family, and there is no evening hours to write anything. And of course, English is not my native language, so I had to learn a lot of vocabularies, sentences, things like that. And of course, I read, but I read everything. I read good stuff, bad stuff, whatever comes along. So it's a long story, but eventually I got to a point where my kids were older and gone, and I had a chance to not work full time. And at that point in time, I said, okay, I'm going to do consulting. I'm going to do mentoring, because I really and truly believe in Sandbox, and you have gone through that as well. And you know how useful that is to a lot of engineers and students. So, I said, this is my life. I mean, I'm not gonna spend more time in corporate America, which is wonderful when you are doing it, but And then I started writing, and I, of course, like everybody else, the first version wasn't very good, but I used my mentorship and my entrepreneurial spirit. I said, I'm gonna have people read it, and people read the first version, and everybody says, it's a wonderful story. You gotta write. And then, of course, version 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And as entrepreneurs, we all know that the passion and the inspiration is 1%, and then the hard work and sweat is 99%. So here we are.
I love that. And your book's name is Silence Whispers.
Yes.
And I'd love for you to tell us more about the book. I have obvious questions about, is it fictional? Is it your story, a story of other women? So I'd love to hear your version of in between the lines of this book. Before we dig more into some leadership questions also I have for you with your leadership philosophy.
Sure, absolutely. So the book, well, as I said, I'm a very curious person. When I first started having a little time to myself, I looked at, the question of what happened in Iran has always been in my mind. And also, we are technologists. I was in the first generation of the smartphones. I was one of the people who were evangelizing it from standpoint of, I don't know, technology. As you have time to pause, and my good friend, there are many professors at Sloan, Professor Ancona, for example, who writes about taking a pause. Take a pause, think about it, so I had a chance to take a pause and say, okay, what happened in Iran? And what happened in Iran, if you look at the modernization, middle of the 19th century, this was a truly backward country between two different empires, one from the North Russians and one from the East, British Empire, which was, of course, in India. And then the other side of it, the west of Iran, was Ottoman Empire, which was crumbling. And, it's segment of Europe. And, of course, Germans were very much involved in it, and the colonial power were very much involved with Ottomans. So Iran was sort of being squeezed from all sides, from other sides. So Iran had no choice but modernize to try to defend itself, try to stay a sovereign nation. So technology came to Iran, science and modernity. And the way it came to Iran was by a lot of students went outside and they studied, and foreigners came to Iran and started businesses, and some Iranians started businesses, factories, things like that. But with this modernity came modern ideas and secular laws, right of women. Women can't be confined to home and the chador. And Iranian women historically have been brazen enough, and so they became even more brazen. So we had I think that the tipping point was the early 20th century, when you had a very weak central government, and that they started a constitutional monarchy, but then, of course, World War I happened. Iran was being violated from left and right. Eventually, of course, Reza Shah came to power, Pahlavi dynasty started. But that 20 years are pivotal. And I did a lot of studies. Again, research is what I know how to do. That's what Emma taught me. It's you gotta look for things. You have answers for it. You have to hypothesize things. And so after all of that, for a while I was thinking about, and these are very, this is an obscure, corner of Iranian history from standpoint of Americans, because Americans are very interested in 1953 and the coup d'etat and the revolution. They're not going back far enough. Whereas the root of all of these breakup within, Iranians are of two minds. One mind wants to be more modern than Americans. One mind wants to be more restrict than Taliban. So can't live in the same country. Is it the same country? Is it, are we all? And the other thing is that I started seeing the same roots, the same problems in America, because we're also getting further and further apart from each other. So as I said, our first idea was to write some, a book, whatever. And then, believe it or not, one morning I woke up with the idea of Gohar, my main character, this young woman who is going through this transformative life, to transformative country, and that transformations give her some chance, as well as she can take advantage of that. So that was the first inclination. Of course, as I said, then I learned I had mentors and I had teachers. I was lucky to work with some of the good ones. And I thought how to do, I learned how to do character development and the plot development. These all came later. In the beginning, I just wanted to tell the story of that time in Iran through the eyes of this young woman that I imagined. So, so ask me any question you want.
I love it. So I want to learn more about this woman and how much you relate actually to her in your
Yes,
story. And also you talked about the unfortunate both sides that we're seeing, the extremes, let's say,
yes,
that we're
yes,
seeing all across the world these days.
yes, yes.
So I'd love for you to tell me her story, how you relate to her, and how you're living in a world of more and more extremism on all sides.
Yes. So number one, let's just start with Gohar. When I first started to write the letter again and to write this story, I had no idea how to develop a character. This is a person who does this. I wasn't good enough. And one of the things, and I work with this lady, Ellie Rubin, that's, the two of us, she was both my editor and my mentor, in terms of editing. She never changed anything. She just said, this doesn't work, go and change it, but change it in your own voice. And it was a process. Sometimes I got angry and she got angry and we almost, but we worked together and she's a wonderful person. And today we still work together on the sequels. But the thing that she told me is that when you develop a characters, you gotta sometimes look into yourself. How would you do? How would you feel? How would you think? And so go ahead, shares a lot of characters with me, but she's not me. She's a different person. She's doing things that Gohar will do, not things that I would do. One of a couple of things that we share is number one is that we both very curious. So she's curious. She's always thinking. And for that, I basically went back and thought of that I knew in Iran and brought out the stories and the way, they manners and then their lives and things like that. It's a fictional story. Obviously the characters didn't exist. Now, the other thing that is true, my great grandfather was Russian and he married my great grandmother. That is true too. There were lots of Russians who liked Iranians who came to Iran and lived there and for a long, long time. My grandfather was originally from this town called Ordubad, which is no longer in Iran. It's actually between Azerbaijan and Georgia. It is part of Azerbaijan, but it is in part of Nakhchivan, which is also an interesting story. I want to go there someday, but not yet. My grandfather, for example, was very, very active in trying, and there was a very short-lived republic in the 1919, right after World War I, in Azerbaijan. And my grandfather was very much into helping. This is before my time, but he would tell me the stories. How he helped, how he sent money and things like that. So some of those stories, again, I heard from them. I augmented that with lots of research, clearly. So here we are. So it is true that Russians did marry Persians. So.
Fascinating. And yeah, it's such a region full of history, way more complex than what media or news want to tell us about all this part of the world. So, well, thank you for shedding a different light on this and a different experience. There's something that really I'm intrigued as a philosophy that you have, which is the past can shed light on our technology-fueled future.
Yes.
And you mentor a lot of startups, really building the future of tech through MIT and other institutions. I would love to hear more about this specific philosophy of yours.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I just wrote a little piece for my newsletter. We think that, all of these things, I mean, this is the thing. Technology is fast, human being and laws and things like that are slow. If you look at, for example, 100 years ago when radio was becoming, I'm a student of history. I love history. When I teach entrepreneurship, I always have one or two case studies from some old companies there because there's a lot of lessons in their successes and also in their failures. I mean, I talked to them about Polaroid, how great it was, and then it wasn't, about Lang Laboratories, and these are recent past, 50 years ago, 40 years ago. But they were all there. So there's a lot of lessons. Underneath all of these technologies, a human being who has to use it for good or bad. And every time that you have a radically new technology that is rapidly commercialized. So once everybody, I mean, yes, a lot of people knew about radio waves in 1800s, but it wasn't until 1920s that radio became a commonplace. And people went out and bought it. And, there were all kinds of stories about what business model would this thing work at and how vicious it could be. I just found an article in a magazine written in 1929 titled "Radio Curse or Blessing." So change radio with internet, with AI, with whatever you want. At the end of the day, in the beginning, all new technologies that are radical are both fascinating to people and also scary. But at the end of the day, we just have to come to live with them, to use them the way we need to use them. We can't have them rule over us. I mean, and human agency is what makes us happy. I'm happy because this book and read it or not. If somebody constantly tells me, read this book, I won't. Because I'm actually a defiant person. That's another trait I share with my heroine, that I don't take anything under face value. So we need to, first, on one hand, chill out, don't be scared. From another hand, not to get blown up by the technology. We gotta take it. We gotta make it human. We gotta pick and choose what we want. It really, really angers me when I go and watch some, television. I want to go with streaming services. I don't know, I'm Amazon Prime, whatever. And instead of telling me what are these genres that I can choose from, they show me all these movies that I may or may not like. Yes, of course, they help me with my choices, but it's sort of a little bit I'm put off with it. It's like, what are they saying? Why is this book on the top of everything else? Is that because Amazon is making more money? Is it really good? So we are losing, this choices that are, I'm an engineer. You always optimize based on something. And unfortunately, the most of our social media and most of our most of what we see is optimized on eyeballs and commercial and things like that. So I don't expect Amazon or Google or Microsoft to be ethical beings. Okay, so they're corporations, they have to make money. But I think as humans, we have to start taking control of our own destiny, so to speak. So that's the philosophy behind looking always at the past, because that teaches us a lot.
I want to give you now a word, and
yes.
I would love your first reaction to it.
Sure.
So the first one is leadership.
Okay, leadership is to take a team of people to a certain place. And there are many different kinds of styles of leadership, if you will. I mean, a military leader might be also cooperative and convince people and take them somewhere. At some point, you have to say, I'm not gonna, in the middle of a war, everybody's shooting at us. You don't have time to discuss everything, but to collaborative as much as possible. So a leader is the person who sees it has a vision, sees the future. A leader, the good leader, will share that vision, the places to go with others, and take the whole team there. So it's not that the leader is, across the river, whereas everybody else is still in the other side. So it's leadership is, to me, that's what it means.
What about innovation?
Well, innovation is coming up with something new. But to me, it's always something new that does something better. Better, faster, cheaper. It's just that, we learn, we teach that to our teams. Why is this thing better? I mean, it's for better. You've been at MIT. So at MIT, we deal with a lot of technology. And a lot of times, it's the technology looking for solution. I always tell people, fall in love with the problem, not with your solution. And because, it's always good to be curious and to work on something we don't know what it's good for yet. That's science. That's wonderful. But innovation has to do with usability. You got to make something that's useful to people. And they can make their lives better. I mean, it could be something to, cure a disease, maybe make food better, whatever. So to me, somebody who comes up with a new fancy dish and it's a very tasty dish, that's innovation.
What about startups?
Startups. Oh, yeah. We are a nation of startups. Startups, to me, are people who have a passion and decide that the tried and true ways in operations or whatever doesn't work for them for one reason or the other, and they start something new. Again, it has hand in hand, hopefully, with innovation. You open a new bakery flour bakery in Boston, flour, very close to Sloan, a couple of them. So, it's opening a bakery is not a big deal. It's not innovation, except that she came up with a new way of approaching the problems. That was innovative. And she started a startup to make that innovation possible, commercialize, make it accessible to people. So that's a definition of startup.
And the last one is spread love in organizations.
Oh, spread love, I don't know. Spread passion, because everything in the word love moves the word. And it's not only love between two entities, one person and an animal. Love is love. When we are thinking about somebody else besides ourselves or some other entities besides ourselves, that's love. And that's that is what makes that's a huge motivation. And if we have a organization where people feel empathy towards each other, it's a good organization.
Any final word of wisdom, Afarin, for leaders around the world?
Stop thinking about, if you look at people, all these leaders, they're trying to create chasms between people so that they stay in power. People have more in common with each other than differences. But unfortunately, today's leaders are, and they're not leaders in my mind. They are powers, the powers of being strong people. But those people, and my advice to them is that, wise up, bring people together, because otherwise we're going to have, just going back to past and future. Technology is a tool, and the more we make it stronger, it also has the effect of potentially more danger. I mean, an atomic bomb is millions of times more dangerous than a knife. And now we have AI and generative AI and all this other technologies. We have tools of destruction, and they gotta be careful.
Let's bring people together. That's a great way to finish our chat today. Thanks again, and congrats for your book.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. And yes, I love nothing better than trying to be a bridge between people. I think that's what we need today.
Thanks for listening to the show. For more episodes, make sure to subscribe to SpreadLoveIO.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Let's inspire change together and make a positive impact in healthcare, one story at a time.